Hello everybody, I'm Dr. Urvashi Sharma, Associate Professor, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication from Jagannath University, Jaipur. In today's session, we'll look at the contribution, beginning and growth of Hindi journalism in India. Let us first look at the rise and growth of Hindi journalism. Uddand Martand was the first Hindi newspaper published by Sri Yugal Kishore Shukla from Calcutta on 30th May 1826. It was a weekly which was published every Tuesday and priced at rupees 2 annually. It went on publishing for 1 year and 7 months. The Hindi speaking Kolkatans took no interest in the magazine as expected. That caused its untimely closure with the following editorial on 4 December 1827. The day marks the death of Uttand Martand. Here it goes to sunset, the sun at last. Uddant was not a political newspaper, but it can never be looked down upon for its contribution to Hindi language. Born on 1788 in Kanpur, Shuklaji was preceding reader in Divani Khechkhari of Calcutta and has ability to edit magazine. Besides Hindi, he could write in Braj Bhasha. He, though, might have opposed English, but his eyes remained glued to the method of the English merchandise. Uddant Martand, though of very short journey, constructed the path for Hindi journalism, which later on not only acted as a vehicle of social change, political and academic change, but also became the voice of Indian freedom. Banaras Akbar in 1845 from Kashi was one of the first weekly published from Hindi state. Though the name of the paper is Hindi, yet it was composed using words from three languages, Devanagari, Arabic and Persian, making it complex for the commoners to read. Strangely, the editor of this bilingual, spirited newspaper was a Marathi-speaking Govind Raghunath Thate. A monthly, Buddhi Prakash, came out from Agra in 1852 under editorship of Munshi Sada Sukhlal. For this magazine, an eminent French professor, Garian Tasse, went to the extent of saying he used to print interesting essays on news items. Even articles of sheer academic value, such as history, geography, mathematics, education, and on other subjects, were published in it. The outbreak of 1857 mutiny brought out new political consciousness in Hindi belt and a vehement protest against the brutal tyranny of the British colonists. With new political awareness and earnest eagerness for advancement of his own language, Hindi, Bhartendu Harish Chandra was inspired to promote social, economic, and academic reforms in Hindi region. He used to go through the contemporary newspapers, books, and magazines to find out path for Hindi readership. He was not only well versed in Urdu, English, Braj Bhasha, Khadi Boli, Bangla, but also in English, and that shows his link with the Western literature. In 1868, he motivated Hindi writers to publish the monthly Kavi Vachan Sudha from Kashi. In the beginning, it published the collected works of the poets, but later it became fortnightly, allowing the prose work too. In 1875, Sudha turned into a weekly and began to be published both in Hindi and English by 1885. Bhartendu had created a flicker by publishing Sudha in Hindi speaking areas. So it is important to note that Modern day Hindi is not as it is spoken today. Rather, it has emerged over a period of years. Hindi was spoken in varied dialects, and it is the brilliance of the varied poets, writers, journalists, and literature scholars of India who have contributed to raising the Hindi that it is spoken today. Between 1850 and 1857, a number of newspapers were published in Hindi. Among them were Banaras Akbar, Sudhakar Tattva Bidinoi, Patrika, and Satya. One of the major contributors of Hindi literature and journalism at large was a great Indian writer who is also called the father of modern Hindi, Harish Chandra Bhartendu. While, when all of us were deep dwelled into sleeps of ignorance, Bhartendu brought mass consciousness and advocated for gender equality. He dreamed of India's self-rule, her complete sovereignty, and that was earlier than the foundation of the Indian National Congress. An influential magazine, Bharat Mitra, was edited by Rudradatta Sharma on 17th May 1878 from Kolkata. Bhartendu revealed that Bharat Mitra was a political journal, though contained genetic subjects. Bhartendu age in Hindi literature and journalism is deemed to be the golden era that marks not only awareness among the Hindi speaking people, but also the sharp reaction against British repression. The beginning phase. Scholars in the history of Indian journalism trace the first weekly paper in Hindi to be Utund Martund, published by Jugal Kishore Shukla in Kolkata in 1826. Utund Martund appealed for a conscious concession in postal fees for the first 8 copies of his paper, but was rejected. It could not sustain itself and thus closed down in 1827, barely within a year of beginning the publication. It is during this time the popular social reformist Raja Ram Mohan Roy, also known for his intellectual skills and his strong opinion against social evils like sati, brought out a newspaper himself. Roy wrote many articles opposing sati and other social evils that had ingrained themselves in Hindu culture. He wrote against orthodox ideas that perpetuated these social evils in the religion. He was not in favor of Serampore missionary who were promoting Christianity either. His paper, Bangadut, which was published in 1829, was actually printed in 4 languages, namely English, Bangla, French, Nagari, which is a Hindi dialect, which highlighted all the above issues. Banaras Akbar, a Hindi newspaper with the local news and some translation from Sanskrit law book, was started in Kashi in the year 1845 with Govind Rangunathan Tate as editor. The paper had 44 subscribers. Another paper called Martand was published in 1846 by Maulvi Nasiruddin, which consisted of 5 languages including Hindi, Urdu, Bengali, Persian, and English in one paper in 5 columns. Malwa Akbar was started in 1848 in the state of Madhya Pradesh by Prem Narayan. In the meanwhile, the publisher of Uttund Martan, Jugal Kishore, made another attempt in 1850 at starting one more Hindi newspaper in Calcutta called Samtant Martand, while Naran Mohan Mitra started a newspaper in Khadi Boli, a dialect in Hindi called Sudhakar, in the same year. In 1854, the first bilingual daily in Hindi and Bengali, by Shyam Sundar Sen was published in Calcutta. It was called Samachar Sudha Varshan and had a continuity for almost 14 years. It is often considered as the first Hindi daily, despite the fact that it was bilingual and that Uttun Martand was published before it. In 1857, a paper with a strong political views, with the view of Hindu-Muslim unity for freedom of India, was Payam-e-Azadi, which was the brainchild of Azimullah Khan and edited by Mirza Bedkar Bhakt. Azimullah Khan was well aware of the divide and rule policy of the British Empire, and he tried his best to conscientize the people about the same through his paper. Gautam Chattopadhyay, in his article Petition, Protest and Revolt, The Changing Phase of Anti-Imperialist Press in India, 1857 to 47, writes that the paper started publication from Delhi in 1857 in Hindi and Urdu, and right from May 1857 it openly supported the rebels. In September 1857, its Marathi edition was published from Jhansi, and it became truly the central organ of the revolt. The copies of this journal are now available only in British Library. The Harish Chandra phase, 1867 to 1899. One of the major contributors to Hindi literature and journalist at large was a great Indian writer who is also called the father of modern Hindi, Harish Chandra Bhartendu. Bhartendu's influence most probably was his father Gopalachandra, who was a poet himself and wrote in Braj Bhasha, a dialect of Hindi, and not exactly the modern Hindi that we speak today. Before Bhartendu, the prose of Hindi was being written in three styles: Braj Bhasha prose, prose in Khari Boli, and prose in Rajasthani, which was limited to the religious tales, commentaries, love stories, and historical tales. The prose of Khariboli could not get established on account of faction of Hindi Urdu. Other dialects which were considered quite close to Hindi were Avdi, Nagari, and other Mithili languages. Bharti started his career with Kavi Vachan Sudha, a first poetic literary magazine in 1867, and Harish Chandra magazine, which was later christened as Harish Chandrika in 1872. It was a monthly newspaper with poetry, literature, travel, satirical, and humorous essays. In 1874, he also started Bala Bodhini, a women journal in Hindi. Bhartendu Harish Chandra is attributed for his drastic rise of literary Hindi and its promulgation. The other Hindi journals and papers from 1877 to 1900 include Kavi Sudha in 1877 from Banaras, Bastate-ul Ashkiya from Aligarh, and bilingual Hindi-English monthly newspaper called The Aryan in 1878 by by Reverend J. Hewitt. Amit Kumar Dubey adds a few more names like Caste Vidyavhar Dharma Pacharak, Bharat Chandrodaya Dharma Prakash, Abla Hit Karak, Shubh Samvad, Prayag Mitra, Aryavrata, Narad Muni, Devnagari Gazette, Jain Prabhakar, Vidya Vinod, Chaturvedi Patrika, Bharat Bhushan, etc. Mrinal Chatterjee, in her paper History of Hindi Journalism mentions a few more papers which contributed to the growth of Hindi journalism in this era. She says newspapers like Bharat Mitra, Saraswati, Dhanidhi, Uchit Waqt, Hindi, Bagavasi were published from Calcutta during the last 3 decades of 19th century. Bharat Mitra, published from Calcutta, became the leading Hindi newspaper of the time under dynamic stewardship of early editors Bal Mukund Gupta, Ambika Prasad Bajpai. Before we move to literary phase, let's look at Saraswati, which was one of the most important paper of this phase. Saraswati is supposed to be the first most popular Hindi monthly, which was published by Chintamani Ghosh from Prayag at the Indian Press in 1900. It was recognized by Nagri Parachani Sabha. Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi took charge of editorship of Saraswati in 1903, and third stage of Hindi Renaissance began with his consciousness campaign among the Hindiwalas, both socially and culturally. Though its main object was to do away with the feudal and colonial system in every walk of life, yet somewhat it was patronized by government that prevented the paper from voicing directly and openly against the English rule. Sorry. Dwivedi was full of patriotism, though he was much in favor of the British judiciousness and good governance. He cared both for the proprietor of the newspaper and the British government. He reformed his faults after 1906 and stopped talking less against the British government. If necessary, he criticized her. The Hindi Renaissance during Dwivedi age was the age of the revival of social, political, and economical problems, which were gradually mirrored in the poetry, while songs emoted themes of social arousal. So, in the literary phase, we see Saraswati, Abhyudhya 1900, and many other papers revolutionized the era in their times. Acharya Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi was a man known for his expertise in literature and history. It was under his editorship that Saraswati, a newspaper in Khadi Hindi, gained huge prominence. Another sub-editor named Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi contributed his mite to Saraswati too. At later stage in 1939, Vidyarthi started his own newspaper called Pratap, which gained huge popularity. He was a social reformist and often highlighted his paper the plight of suffering farmers of Raebareli and other suffering people in the Indian state. Abhyudaya by Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya was a Hindi weekly, also contributed massively to the Indian freedom struggle. At a later stage, he also founded the Hindustan Dainik in Hindi in 1936, which rose to popularity. Vijay, another Hindi newspaper that worked immensely for the freedom struggle, was launched in the year 1918 in Delhi by Pandit Indra Vidya Vachaspati. This paper was inspired by Swami Shraddhanand, who contributed to many nationalist articles. It strongly opposed Rowlatt Act with a series of articles well scripted by Swami Shraddhanand, a lawyer by profession who was very meticulous in his opinion so that it could not be retaliated or pulled down by the Britishers. After his departure to Lahore, the paper could not survive and it succumbed to pressure in 1920. Besides these, there were other papers that contributed to nationalism. freedom from the tyranny of British and Hindu-Muslim unity. These popular newspapers included Biswamitra or Vishwamitra as we call it in 1916, started by Mahendra Chandra Agarwal. Next we'll look at the Gandhian phase. Swarajya was started in 1920 by T. Prakasham, Sainik by Krishna Datta Paliwal in Agra, Desh by Babu Rajendra Prasad in Patna, Swami Shraddhanand's Veer Arjun, and two other magazines, namely Nirsana and Devnagar. They were all popular in this era. Swatantrata started in 1939 by Poon Chand Gupta and Jagdish Chandra Kulsia. This paper was gradually launched as Dainik Jagran, which is very popular and has a huge readership today. It is said that by 1924 there were almost 104 dailies in Hindi which were in circulation, and some of them even run for a longer span while others had a short lifespan. Another paper that brought in a revolution and popularized Hindi was Aaj by Shiv Prasad Gupta. It started publication on 5th September 1920 from Banaras with Baburao Vishnu Prakarkar as his editor. The paper grew in circulation and was hailed for its stand on nationalism under brilliant editing skills from Pararkar. Pararkar had been imprisoned earlier too for his nationalism. He advocated a revolution through his writings and bluntly opposed the stand of the British government, who was suppressing the freedom of press. After his return from Africa, Gandhiji revolutionized the phase in Indian freedom struggle by steering Satyagraha, Dandi March, Salt Satyagraha, non-violence movement, promoting Khadi and the use of press. His contribution to journalism was seen in all his papers, be it Young India, Indian Opinion, Navjeevan, Harijan and Harijan Sevak. Gandhiji launched a Gujarati newspaper on October 7, 1919. It was called Navjeevan, and on 8th October 1919 he launched an English daily called Young India. Navjeevan, the Gujarati newspaper, actually became popular and had a circulation of 12,000 copies as compared to 1200 copies of Young India, which led Gandhiji to launch a Hindi version of the paper Navjeevan on 9th August 1921. Although it is said that the subscription of the Hindi Navjeevan dropped considerably from 12,000 to 1400. India was and continues to have ingrained caste system. Despite the modern era in many parts of India, this caste discrimination continues to be upheld. Harijan was a word used by Gandhiji to address untouchables. In order to encourage people to overcome this discrimination, he gradually started a newspaper called Harijan in English on February 11, 1933 from Yerwada jail in Pune, where he was imprisoned by the Britishers. He gradually launched the Hindi edition of the same paper on 23rd February 1933 from Delhi, with Vyogi Hari as his editor, and titled it Harijan Sevak. He drew financial support for his paper from Ghanshyam Das Birla. Britishers were wary of Harijan and asked Gandhiji to submit the paper for proofreading before printing, to which Gandhiji refused and demanded that freedom of press was his right. The paper too succumbed for this reason by its 10th issue. Gradually, due to financial losses, the paper was closed down. The newspapers were a weapon that silently and non-violently stoked the fire of freedom all across India and British government grew weary of its reach and power. At height of its movement, the British government brought in the Press Act 1910, due to which, within a few years, over 350 printing presses were punished with penalization and almost 300 newspapers were asked for security deposits. The pressurization, penalization, and harassment led to the closure of almost 200 papers, sorry. However, this only catapulted, sorry, freedom movement as this act of penalizing and trying to shut down the voices of the locals only confirmed to the mismanagement in India and cruelty shown towards Indians by East India Company and the Britishers. Let us now look at some of the highlights of the pre-independence phase, right, before we move to the post-independence phase. In 1907, weekly Sahitya was brought out by Madan Mohan Malviya from Prayag, and in the same year, Hind Kesari was started from Nagpur by Madhav Rao Sapre. The young enthusiast from Kanpur, Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi, launched a flamboyant and revolutionary weekly Pratap in 1910, which was the mouthpiece of the rebellious youth who had yearnings for an Angrez Mukt Bharat. The paper rendered not only revolutionary dimensions but also novel upheavals. Another significant journalist contribution to Hindi is the appearance of Prabha in 1913, first published from Khandwa by Kaluram Gangarade and Makhanlal Chaturvedi, and later in 1919 began to come out from the Vidyarthis Pratap Press of Kanpur. Prabha too was a dedicated newspaper to freedom struggle. Chand was a significant journal allied with Prabha and Pratap. It planted seeds of poisonous cactus in the Indians for English by publishing Nand Kumar written Fasi. Chand sowed the seed of hatred against English colonial rule, as Winston Churchill had for the Indian natives, and played a pivotal role in freedom movement. The popular book in 3 volumes written by Sri Sundarlal, Bharat Mein Angrezi Raj, were immediately banned and seized. But despite governmental intrusions, thousands of copies were circulated nationwide. In 1920, Shiv Prasad Gupta started Arch from Kashi to facilitate the freedom struggle. On 19th August 1921, Gandhiji launched Hindi version of Navjeevan. Acharya Shiv Pujan Sahai began with the editing monthly journal Adarsh in 1922. In the same year, a weekly journal, Madhuri, was launched from Lucknow under editorship of Dulare Lal Bhargav. Madhuri earned good reputation in a shorter span, and it was primarily a literary magazine or a journal. Publication of Hindi weekly Matwala started on 26th August 1923 from Kolkata, to which eminent Hindi literatures laureates like Suryakant Tripathi Nirala, Mahadev Prasad Seth, Shiv Pujan Sahai, Bachchan Sharma, Ugra, and Navjadik Lal Srivastava were attached. Matwala was an outspoken paper of wisdom and humor, whose comments were sharp and stinging. It had unrestrained, fearless comments on culture, society, communalism, and politics, due to which it had to walk on the sharp edge of censorship for 6 years. In 1928, it was again from Calcutta Banarsi Das Chaturvedi began to edit monthly Vishal Bharat. It is opined that Chaturvedi ji had more journalistic morality than literary foresights adhere, and there was no tiptoeing for freedom struggle in the journal. In 1933, Gandhiji started Harijan Sevak, which was a vehicle of his crusade against untouchability and poverty. Last phase of Munshi Premchand was trend of extremism. Jallianwala Bagh massacre, going back of Simon Commission, commitment of Purna Swaraj, sentence of hanging to Bhagat Singh, round table conference in London hold testimonials of political extremity. Such was the time of political repression and upheavals that Premchand began to publish Hans in 1930. The firelight of patriotism, which was lit by Bhartendu and passing through editorial excellence of Vidyarthi, reached the climax by Premchand's politico-literary journal. The early works of Premchand reflected that the idea of Gandhism have influenced him, but gradually he evolved his own vision on politics and literature. He entered the world of literature by abandoning the service of school inspector during the turbulent period of political passion by turning Prem Chandra from Dhanpat Rai. He illustrated the odds and oddities of British rule to Indian people with fierce virulency in literature and as well as his editorials of Hans, which resulted in punitive sentences by the Raj. He introduced a weekly called Jagran along with Hans, though it vanished, but Hans is still alive. Premchand is one of those Hindi writers who condemned the British course of action through his regular writing. In September 1936, in the last issue of Hans of his lifetime, a brilliant essay, Mahajani Sabhatya, was published, which is a testimony of Premchand's sharpening revolutionary consciousness. The country has witnessed ups and downs of numerous Hindi journals and newspapers during the fight for independence, and most of them have acted as an effective weapon of social and political renaissance. Hindi journalism has been the backbone of freedom struggle through formation and propagation of nationalist ideology and building up of strong national sentiments consciousness amongst the masses. Its contribution has always been saluted by Indian people. If we look at the post-independence phase, today Hindi journalism and publishing has grown in leaps and bounds. The highest readership in India is that of Hindi newspapers. Dainik Jagran, Dainik Bhaskar are most popular. So is Amar Ujala, which was started in 1948 in Agra and has grown sizably. Dainik Bhaskar has a name of its own as it promoted a secular and unifying approaches, especially in troublesome time in India. During the Ayodhya riots, the newspaper, like other newspaper, urged people for peace. Although it was initially published in 1956 as a Hindi daily called Subha Savere and Good Morning India from Gwalior, it was gradually named Bhaskar Samachar and then relaunched as Dainik Bhaskar by 1958. Punjab Kesari, another Hindi daily, was started by late Lala Jagat Narayan ji in 1965. There are too many newspapers and it is impossible to name them all. However, it is to be noted that post-independence newspaper contributed their mite to the concept of development journalism and highlighting the plight of the people. Many went through huge turmoil during the days of emergency. Some opposed the emergency with various expressions, including circulation with blank papers to oppose emergency, and were penalized. However, their might grew. The people were slowly getting educated, and as a result, the circulation grew higher. However, currently commercialization dominates the press. While it continues to give news and information, it is also to be noted that advertisement revenue has gained primary importance in the circulation of newspapers. Corporate management, commercialization, and state interference has taken its toll on what is being printed and given to the people. The recent investigation led by Cobra Post team of investigative journalists in India exposed how many newspapers belonging to corporates were willing to compromise with their content for the sake of money. It is not good for country like India. Press, along with other media, is the fourth pillar of democratic India. It has to strictly adhere to the principles in which it rose during the freedom struggle. Commercialization and interference prevents the press from effectively carrying out its role as a crusader of truth, generating awareness, bringing to light what is happening in the society. So, if we are commercialized as a media organization, it hinders our role as a watchdog of society or as a whistleblower. We, as a fourth pillar of democracy, it is our duty to bring to light what is happening in society so as to promote the ideas or the thoughts or the ideology which are good so that the public opinion can be molded. Even though the injustice is taking place in the society, it becomes our duty as a media organization to highlight that injustice so that together we can unite and work towards the achievement of justice in that issue. So, commercialization leads to biasness, it kills objectivity, and it makes news and information subjective, which is a threat to the principle of journalism, which is truth, and it hampers the credibility of that particular organization and media as a whole. Despite all these issues, journalism is a boon. It educates, informs, and brings to force the issues that require attention. In 1924, there were 102 Hindi newspapers. Four of them were dailies like Aaj, Banaras, Swatantrata, Calcutta Arjun, Delhi, and Calcutta Samachar, Calcutta. According to a historian, until 1926, Hindi dailies were not financially successful. Their get-up and printing was poor, and reading material not quite up to the mark, and the editorials unwieldy and lengthy. The weeklies The weeklies were better edited and not got up. Among the well-known, better produced weekly were Bhavishya, Kanpur, Karamveer, Khandawa, and Sainik Agra. Among the important Hindi dailies which flourished in 1930 were Vishwamitra and Bharat Mitra, Sarvodho Bharat, Lokat, Variman, Milap, besides Aj, Arjun, and Lokmanya. As the freedom struggle gained momentum, there was steady rise of Hindi journalism, both in terms of quality and quantity. More Hindi publications started in almost all North Indian states and also in Maharashtra, Bengal, and Andhra Pradesh, especially Hyderabad. Hindi publications, like other language publications, by and large supported the nationalist movement and faced the suppression of the British rulers. One of the important Hindi dailies to be published from the capital was Hindustan, sister newspaper of the Hindustan Times, started in 1936. Wide news coverage and a variety of special features marked the Hindustan, started in 1940. Aryavari of Patna was a sister publication of the Indian Nation, enjoyed considerable influence. Hindi journalism grew more rapidly after independence. After independence, Hindi was adopted as official language of India. This also helped to spread Hindi language nationwide. The Navbharat Times of the Times of India group started in Delhi in 1950. The Amrit Bazar Patrika, Amrita Patrika of Allahabad was another notable Hindi daily which was well known for its editorials. By 1964, Hindi had largest number of newspapers among language papers. The trend of publishing multiple editions from different states helped Hindi newspaper to increase its reach and circulation. According to RNI, which is Registrar of Newspaper in India, the total number of publications in Hindi was 27,527 in the year 2007 and 8, including 3,418 daily newspapers and 12,793 weeklies. By mid-2011, Hindi daily Dainik Jagran claimed to be the largest read newspaper of the world. 6 out of the top 10 newspapers with highest number of readership in India were Hindi. According to IRS Indian Readership Survey, the top 10 largest read Hindi newspapers are Dainik Jagran, followed by Dainik Bhaskar, Hindustan, Amar Ujala, Rajasthan Patrika, Navbharat Times, Prabhat Khabar, Patrika, and Nai Duniya. All of the newspapers have multiple editions from different cities and states. Hindi newspapers are published from several states. Beside the North Indian Hindi belt, sizable number of Hindi publications were in West Bengal, Maharashtra, Gujarat and other states. There are two popular Hindi dailies from Hyderabad, Swatantrata Varta and Milap. Kolkata-based Sanmarg has an edition from Bhubaneswar, Odisha too. Assam also had Hindi newspapers. Dainik Lokmanya was the first Hindi newspaper to be published from Assam. It was published in 1963 in Guwahati by Pandit Ramshankar Tripathi. The 4-page broadsheet was priced 10 paisa and it survived only few months. The Indian language newspapers covered the mental gap between the readers in rural area and English language press. Local language newspapers reflect the views of their readers more accurately and in clear terms than English newspaper. Hindi newspapers and journals acted as an effective weapon for social and political renaissance. Hindi journalism has been the backbone of the freedom struggle through formation and propagation of nationalist ideology and building up strong national sentiment and consciousness amongst the masses. Its contribution has always been saluted by the Indian people. Hindi newspapers played a constructive role in promotion of government policies. Hindi newspapers helped the understanding of the political process, and as a result, more and more people were attracted to the active politics. Hindi newspapers played an important role during election for propaganda and views on local affairs. In India, the English language media is considered the national media, while the language press remains regional. However, from 1980s onward, demographic changes and growth in literacy in the Hindi heartland broadened the market for Hindi newspapers. Comprehensive history of Hindi language journalism in India from its early days as a nationalist papers in the colonial period to its subservience to the English print media in the early decades of independence and the flip it received in the post-emergency 1980s is highlighted by the editor-in-chief of Hindustan, the Hindi newspaper. Post an emergency in 1980s, when an inclusive Hindi propped up by regional dialects became best vehicle for furthering Indian democracy. Examining the close connections between politics, the corporates, and newspapers or news channels, the uh, author or the editor, Mrinal Pandey, has highlighted, can editorials continue to care for individuals' rights and local culture given their proximity to political and corporate lobbyists? How far will our Constitution, given freedom of information and speech, stretch if media laws are amended? It is truth universally acknowledged in the market that readership data is basic currency used to buy and sell media space. 70% of the media revenues are earned thus. But until early 1990s, when the anecdotal wisdom had not hard data drove the game, India was a very different place for the Hindi media. In her long career as an editor, she handled various monthly and weekly Hindi magazines and multi-editions Hindi daily. Hindustan for two of India's biggest media houses. All through, she heard various chiefs of marketing tell her that she should excuse them for not reading the product themselves as they did not read Hindi. But they were always quick to add. They regularly checked with their barber, driver, ayah, and waiters or house guards, and when asked, all of them said it was a good read. The marketing manager also agreed that their ideal reader was not person like us. It was someone who read Hindi only because they could not read English. Two well-known owners confined that they had deliberately chosen to retain their successful English publication's name for the product as it gave them an upmarket image in the English crazy Hindi heartland. One of them told Mrinal that the aspirational small town Hindi readers today must love to win friends and influence people among those they had saw as having arrived. So, by quoting the name of the Hindi magazine when talking about their reading habits, one could easily lure people into believing that magazine being named was the English version. By late 1980s, from TV sets to denim jeans, the most coveted items of personal consumption for India's upwardly mobile, urban middle classes were the imported ones, as mined products in the new manageries fast becoming popular. Hindi newspapers and periodicals, even though they were registering vast sales, were considered somewhat lowbrow. Hindi print media was to the upper middle class India, to which most young owners, ad agency executives, and managers of major publishing houses belonged. Something consumed by low visibility, high financial risk universe. Clerks, drivers, small shop owners, dabbawalas, and housewives. When they fanned out to agencies offering space for ads, they basically promoted the house, English dailies, and threw in a special offer in shape of simultaneously placement of ad in the Hindi daily for almost half price. Indeed, some of them felt truly mortified by the prospect of handling a Hindi product. Around the year 2000, at a group promotional function, the marketing manager, she was told, did not wish to be photographed with the low grade marketing staff of Hindi paper for fear of tainting her image as a smart, young marketing manager amongst her colleagues, and downgrading her worth in the market. The cunning passages and whispering corridors of Hindi Belt, the Indian market in Hindi Belt have harbored within them age-old cunning passages and whispering corridors. Brilliant young editors were men S.P. Singh of Ananda Bazar Patrika Group, driving a news weekly Ravivar, Prabhu Chawla of Hindi India Today, Manohar Sham Joshi of Hindustan Time Group's Weekly, Saptahik Hindustan, Rajendra Mathur, editor of the Times Group Hindi Navbharat Time, Prabhas Joshi, who launched the Hindi Jansatta for Express Group, and scores of others dotted the field. They were never given their due until some of them began appearing on television and became overnight celebrities in the field of news analysis and debate. But still, a glaring lack of proper staff and in-depth coverage of financial and corporate issues caused deteriorations in the business reporting in Hindi and continues to this date. The social snobberies of the manager and space sellers of Hindi media did not allow them to see how serious business opportunities had been slowly developing in the last 2 decades of the 20th century. In Tier 2 cities like Kanpur, Jalandhar, Jaipur, Pune, Nagpur, and Raipur, local business reporters being largely absent, the visible or invisible pressure on editors and or direct orders to bureau representatives from the managers or the owners to keep major source of corporate and political advertising happy often led to slanted interpretations, inaccuracies, or plain untruths with no clear mention of sources. This was the time of business boom in mid 1990s when initial public offerings were increasing and verifiable business news were badly needed in Hindi among average middle class Hindi media consumers. But most CEOs and ad managers in media publishing houses continued to strategize about how to attract more readers for their English dailies and cut cost of the Hindi dailies, which they were reluctant to promote despite visible proof that color TVs, soft drinks, and all manners of white good were being bought by the middle class in small towns in India and the rich rurals in villages. Gradually, the ambivalence of the Hindi print media towards advertising was discarded. Around mid 1990s, the large sales figures of Hindi papers began to be began to be too visible to ignore. As a matter of fact, the annual Indian readership surveys were also throwing up figures showing that each part of India, vernacular print media was far outselling English, and stirrings finally began in the usual placid world of owners and managers. The capitalized billing of Hindi rose by over 30% by 1998. 2 years later, as a new millennium arrived, the advertisers worldwide underwent a total sea change. In 2001, India's decadal census highlighted a dramatic growth in the literacy rate in the country. Among the most backward, northern Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh, popularly known as Bimaru, states in the Hindi belt, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh registered almost one-fifth decline in illiteracy within a decade, and in Rajasthan, literacy rates jumped by over 22%, when national average of rise in literacy for the same period was a little above 13%. Television, first seen as an enemy, had proved to be a great friend of print media, and in that it made people more eager to read newspaper and extend and verify information. According to National Readership Survey, where there were 131 million readers for Hindi print in 1999. By 2002, the number had grown to 155 million, and by 2005 to 200 million. So, here was incontrovertible proof that by the new millennium, when the West faced a fast shriveling of its print media, India has emerged as the largest publisher of print in the world, with close to 6,700 publications and over 260 million copies distributed daily. So, in this session, we have seen the development of Hindi journalism in India. Hindi journalism, which began as on the similar line as the other vernacular journalism, was to spread the spirit of nationalism and to generate awareness regarding social evils. So Hindi in its true form as we see it today has gone through a number of changes. The early newspapers in Hindi language were printed and published in different dialects of the Hindi language. Now we had seen how Hindi language newspapers were instrumental in bringing about the unity of or in uniting the masses in the Hindi belt region against the foreign rule and promoting the idea of Swaraj. If we look at the number of publication, it increased, and some of the publication also stopped publishing, but the growth of Hindi journalism in the time of independence has been recorded, which was very vast. Then, if we look at the time after independence, we have seen that how the increase in the literacy level amongst the people of the Hindi belt and the country at large helped Hindi journalism or Hindi newspapers gain popularity amongst the masses. Now, these masses uh, were not only aware about what was happening around the world, but the Hindi journalism or Hindi newspapers also sowed the seeds of developmental journalism, which was highlighting the policies and the programs of the government so that people are well aware of it and they're able to utilize the information, utilize the information to reap the benefits out of those policies. Then we have also seen how the editorials of the Hindi journalism changed, right from being editorials which were, say, not structured properly, to the editorials which were very structured, which were hard hitting, which were written in a very uh, uh, simple manner, were now able to mark and connect with the uh, with the readers, and the commercial aspect, the commercialization of Hindi journalism or the print has led to the, say, uh, gaining more and more ad revenues, had somewhere or the other made Hindi journalism or Hindi newspapers buyers, because now they had to accommodate news and information related to their finances, which is one of the things which has been noted in Hindi journalism. Then another thing which is noted, that Hindi journalism has, right from its inception, played a role in generating awareness, mobilizing public, raising the issues, social issues, so that a justice can be met. So Hindi journalism so far and so forth has played a very important role in uh, molding the public opinion towards a nationalistic cause. It has also helped in generating awareness amongst the people. It has lived up to the role of watchdog of society, where it has been an active participator, active organization in bringing about in highlighting what is going on in the society, uniting the people for a cause, and then working towards it. We have also seen that the some of the say publications which have both Hindi and English newspapers or publications have in a way tried to promote their Hindi newspapers as one of the takeaway with their English papers. by launching a subscription combos, like for Hindustan Times, if we subscribe Hindustan Times for a certain number of say months or in years, we get the subscription of Hindustan at half of the price. Or same goes with the Navbharat Times and Jansatta. So every possible way there has been a major role of vernacular press, and Hindi journalism has also played an important role both in pre and post independence era. Thank you.